get out of here on time. In case you have not heard, schools are on a 2-hour delay for tomorrow. So thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it when citizens come out for the town hall meetings. If you are not currently receiving my monthly electronic newsletter and you would like to receive it, there's a sign up in the back of the room. The refreshments this evening are being provided courtesy of the Dalgren Railroad Heritage Trail. This is one of the greatest assets here in King George County, 15 miles of trail. If you have not taken advantage of it, I suggest that you do. It's wonderful, believe me. I would like to recognize this evening, Chairman of the King George Board of Supervisors, Joe Brzezinski, is here, as well as Westmoreland County Supervisor Rosemary Mahan is here. And we're going to start off this evening's presentation with former Delegate Albert Pollard. He's going to explain to you what fracking is, so in case any of you here are not exactly familiar with that. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Ruby. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to King George.
Welcome to King George. It's good to be back. I represented King George for a number of years in the General Assembly. If you all can't hear me, just kind of raise your hands to the back. You can hear me. And it's a pleasure to be here. One of the hardest things with public speaking is to give a speech, a talk for the first time, even though you've given all the facts at various times. And unfortunately, you all are going to be hearing this for the first time. On top of that, I'm also the moderator tonight. I'm a stickler for getting everybody out on time. After I'm speaking, Rick Parrish from the Southern Environmental Law Center is going to be speaking about some of the regulatory programs which overview hydraulic fracturing in general, but also in Eastern Virginia. And then we have from Rockingham County, Pablo Cuevas, who is former chairman of the board. Is that correct? Current chairman. Yeah. He's an important person in Rockingham County, where he and his county administrator have done some field trips out to West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and he's going to relate some of his experiences and insights about Virginia's controls and that type of thing. I'm going to be speaking on 3 different things and kind of skipping the 4th part. So first of all, I'm going to be speaking on what's going on, why are there leases? Second, what is fracking? A lot of you all, this is 101, it could be 001. I apologize if you already know everything. Third, what are the impacts? And fourth, what are the solutions, what are the mitigations? So the number 4, I'm going to be kind of glossing over a little bit more. Why are there leases? Well, there are leases because there is this thing called the Taylorsville Basin. Is this a pointer? Yeah, you'd think there would be a laser pointer.
No,
If this close to Dalgren, you would think there would be a laser pointer. There you go. Okay, so this is the Taylorsville Basin. Obviously, you've got King George County right here. Everybody recognizes that that's the 301 corridor. What is a basin? Well, if you take this cross-section line, and on the next slide, we look, and so moving back, this is the horizontal. A basin is where the continents move apart. And millions and millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, as the continents moved apart, the sediments came down from the Appalachian Mountains and slid right over 95, slid over 301. Yeah, that was a joke. And then filled in these basins as these ancient lake beds. The exposed rift basins are in the western part of the state, to a certain extent even closer to Hanover. And then you've got the buried rift basins, and then you've got offshore rift basins such as Norfolk Basin. So this is the Taylorsville Basin. These are different fault lines. They run all through, obviously Atlantic Ocean right here. So what this Taylorsville Basin means is that there's the potential within this ancient shale bed of gases gas and oil. Everybody's heard there was exploratory drilling back in the late 80s. This is a map, I apologize, it's a little bit out of focus, of the leases that Shore Oil has gotten. This is Caroline County, King George County. This is Route 3 right here, Westmoreland in the Leestown region. This is the next map for Caroline County. Of the 88,000 acres that have been leased by Shore, about half of them are in Caroline County. You've got a percentage in Essex, King and Queen, and then here you've got King George. The red are the leases. I didn't say that specifically. I apologize. The next largest county in terms of leases are Westmoreland. King George is a smattering. You've got 301 right up in here. So those are the leases. The reason the leases is because that's over the deepest part of the basin. And so what is fracking? What is hydraulic fracturing? Well, hydraulic fracturing is the process, and there can be vertical hydraulic fracturing and horizontal hydraulic fracturing. It's the process of drilling a well. You put piping down in the well. You pump concrete into the piping, and it backflows around the piping. And in the case of horizontal fracturing, you might go, you then, when you get into that sedimentary area, you turn a corner, you might go out as far as a mile. They are evidently remarkably accurate with how far they can drill. They know within 20 feet, I've been told, of where this point is, a mile out from here. And then they send a machine down into the pipe, which sets off a series of controlled explosions. These explosions perforate the walls of the piping, and then they inject fluid. If it's hydraulic fracturing, you inject fluid into the piping, you put it under enormous pressure, and you push the fluid out into the seams of the rock, along with sand and what I call a special sauce, what the industry calls a patented formula. It might be a bactericide, it might be something to prevent corrosion within this pipe, but you force that out, and the seams, and by forcing that the fracking fluid out, it opens up the seams, which allows the natural gas to come out. It flows back up with about 60% of the water, and flows back up, and then you capture the natural gas. This is another chart, obviously. So first you've got the water acquisition, you've got the chemical mixing, the well injection, the flow back, which goes into a pond, or actually can be land applied depending upon what's in it, and then it's either land applied or taken to a wastewater treatment plant for disposal. The hydraulic fracturing pit, this is out in the Marcellus region, out in, I believe this was taken in Pennsylvania, could have been in West Virginia. This would be a typical hydraulic fracturing pit for that region. And I want to specify, all regions are different, and this is 101, not 501, so I can't tell you exactly what a pit would look like, and I don't know that anybody could. Not all fracking is hydraulic fracturing. There's also nitrogen fracking. Nitrogen fracking obviously uses nitrogen, not water. The nitrogen escapes into the atmosphere. There are obviously advantages. My understanding is you need to get down underneath and experiment with different fluids and that type of thing in order to figure out exactly what's going on. These are the trucks taking nitrogen in for fracking. What are the impacts and what are the risks? Well, obviously, one of the impacts, if there's successful fracking, is income. Some of the questions, and I think Pablo is going to speak to this, are, how does the income and how are the costs kind of shared through a county region? I'm not going to talk as much about the income side of things, not because I'm saying that they can't be present, but because they're to a private property owner, and I don't know that anybody who's making a lease knows exactly, other than what's in that lease, you know, the $15 an acre, what they're getting. As a public official, former public official, I know that the impacts and the risks have to be weighed with the private gain. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on a little bit. So this might be a typical fracking pad. You can see that the well site's going up. You can see that there's another one in there. It's in a relatively rural area. And, you know, obviously this is somewhat of a disturbance it's an industrialization of a rural landscape. But another risk, if your county isn't thinking about where these things go, you can see this is a church. And so, you know, one of the risks is just the industrialization of a rural landscape. And if this isn't thought through, then that is an unintended consequence. Another risk is obviously is an aquifer risk. And in Virginia, I went to a presentation by the Departments of Mine, Minerals, and Energy the other day, and they made clear that they have had no direct connection between hydraulic fracturing and water pollution in Virginia. And then the gentleman said, I cannot speak to other states. You know, my research, I even read a news article the other day saying that 4 states have concluded, I shouldn't point this at anybody, I can blind somebody, have concluded that hydraulic fracturing has polluted the water supply in those other states. In eastern Virginia, it's of a particular concern because the Potomac aquifer we have essentially one large aquifer. It gets a little bit deeper as you slide further out. You've got obviously your shallow wells, which are artesian aquifer. And if it's not done right, there are consequences for everybody. I'm sort of just laying that on the table, and I'm not going to go a whole lot more into it. But in terms of a risk, I don't think you can give a talk without just laying it on the table. And then so that's a risk in terms of water quality. There's also a risk in terms of water quantity. This is a well in Gloucester County which measures the depth of the water table in order to extract water. So here you've got your feet of the water table, and here you've got your years. So in 2006, it was at 59, and then there was 5-foot subsidence, 6-foot subsidence over that 5-year time period. A lot of the fracking wells in West Virginia, the hydraulic fracturing wells, used between kind of 3 to 5 million gallons of water per frac, which is not an inconsequential amount of water. This is a sign which, if you look at it, it's for the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, and consumptive water use, it's the Jones pad, da-da-da-da-da, peak day consumption, 6 million gallons per day. We talked about industrialization, and I think Paul is going to speak to this a little bit. In some counties in West Virginia, they didn't think ahead of time to make sure that the trucks don't run at the same time as the school buses. And so they've got problems in terms of traffic, in terms of road damage. Virginia does have a gas severance tax. I would encourage any locality to make sure that, you know, possible impacts get into a freeze-thaw situation, that the impact, that the severance tax would pay for any road impact. Because if you're bringing that pipe in on 42-foot sections and you've got, you know, several miles of pipe, there's a lot of truckloads. You've got pipelines and pipeline corridors, and, you know, as I said, the industrialization of a rural area. There's also some noise concerns. When you extract, you put it into these feeder lines, and you put it into a main line, and you put it into compressor stations. This is a compressor station. And evidently the noise, as it is, just like with a small air compressor, a shop air compressor, it can be a noisy endeavor. And for those living nearby, that's a concern. That's obviously can be controlled by zoning. That's not beyond the community's ability to control, but it's something that you want to think through. This is a copy of an oil and gas lease taken out of Essex County. I redacted the name. It's public information, but I just wanted to be polite. And I really thought that the lease pointed out two other concerns. If we go to the second page of the lease here, and it says, the lessee shall have the right at any time during or within 180 days of the expiration, blah, 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 blah. The lessee will bury all pipelines, blah, and no well shall be drilled within 200 feet of any residence or barn. And, obviously it is a lessor's right to, they could have written that to say 50 feet. I personally would not have signed a lease that would allow drilling within 200 feet of my back window. But it does talk about the siting of an industrial activity in a way that fits the community standards, and those can be dictated through your code, through your comprehensive plan, and in a way that comports with community standards. The second part here talks about the rights of either party hereunder may be assigned in whole or in part. And obviously, a lease can be assigned. You can, a farmer might be able to lease land, and if he writes it into the lease, he can then sublease it to other land. It's no different with mineral rights. And I say this because I believe that the folks who are leasing Shore Oil are good people, but ultimately they have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors. And one of my concerns as somebody just from Eastern Virginia is that if their fiduciary responsibility is to their investors, then they can sell the leases and flip them to a hedge fund, flip them to somebody who does not live locally, who does not have deep roots in Eastern Virginia. And they get into tremendous pressure in terms of cutting quarters and that type of thing. In terms of solutions, and I'm really going to sort of blow through this part because I think we've got other parts. And by solutions, I should really use the word mitigations, because what we're talking about is risk. So the main thing that I would say, and I served in state government, so I feel like I can say this more than most people. Don't rely on the state government. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people, but it means, there are not all of the challenges are merely, in my mind, merely challenges of water quality or water quantity. So state federal regulations might protect groundwater, but they do not claim to address noise, traffic, road damage, setbacks, hours of operation, gas flaring, and such. And compare the reward with the size of the risk. This is a community discussion. First of all, I hope it's civil. I didn't say that. I mean, nobody has leased land thinking, I'm out to screw my neighbor. Nobody would do that in King George County, anywhere in the northern net. But, so the discussion should all be civil. And likewise, people who are very concerned about it shouldn't say, you did this just to stick it to me. But the reward, not only to the private landowner, but to the community in terms of economics, needs to comport with the risk. And if the risk is large, then it needs to be thought through. Think about setbacks, think about, and I'm blowing through this, think about well pad spacing, think about, closed loop drilling, think about the standards for casing and cementing. It's really a state level discussion, but have those discussions, with Department of Mining, Mineral Resources, with DEQ. In other areas, they've had, setbacks, distances, minimizing footprints, memorandums of understandings for operators, siting, road impact fees, talking about the fencing so that kids or cattle can't get in and hurt themselves, and green completions. When they're gone, how is it going to look so that the landscape isn't scarred? If you're thinking about leasing, These are some people up in Pennsylvania who kind of banded together, landowners. They're interested in, monetizing their land, but at the same time they want to make sure that if they do it, that they do it in a responsible manner and in a way that maximizes their income. If you're a landowner, you might want to visit that site. And what I've heard from people is, if a landman knocks on your door, do not sign anything initially. They will come back. If you have something they want, they will come back. And, think about it. Take control of the negotiations. Don't sign anything. You're in a better position than they are, and use that in your negotiations. If you do lease, make sure that the company must pay you for everything they take out, because there can be a variety of byproducts. They're going to take out a little bit of recoverable oil. They're going to take out some methane. They're going to take out butane. Make sure that's all there. And make sure you get an audit privilege so that you can see what they take out and you don't have to just rely on their word for it. And I think people in Southwest Virginia can speak to this very well. Thank you very much. I wanted to give credit for the slides to Gwen Lackard, Southern Environmental Law Center, and Dr. Frank Fletcher. Thank you all so much. Rick Parrish from Southern Environmental Law Center.
Thank you, Albert. And thank you, Ruby, for setting this town hall meeting together. If folks can't hear me, please just wave, shout, let me know. I'll speak up as best I can. I'm Rick Parrish from the Southern Environmental Law Center in Charlottesville. We've been looking at issues associated with hydraulic fracturing for about 4 or 5 years now. Not only in Virginia, but elsewhere in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, it's become quite an issue. As Albert said, we're here sitting on top of the Taylorsville Basin. And there's some considerable interest in drilling in the Taylorsville Basin. As many of you probably remember, there was some exploratory drilling back in the late 1980s, conducted by one of the same companies, Shore Exploration, out of Texas, and a couple of the larger oil companies. I believe it was Texaco and maybe Mobil or Exxon. And they found some gas and some oil, but not enough to economically produce in those days at the prices and with the technology then available. Albert had a graphic presentation of what's called horizontal drilling. They weren't able to do that in the late 80s. Now they are. And it allows them to access more of the resource, be it gas or oil, that's combined in these relatively thinner layers of shale, deep, deep, deep underground. It really is impressive technology that they can drill more than a mile underground and then turn the drill sideways and drill horizontally through the shale. Punch holes in the pipe and then fracture the rock. And that's the secret that has made this economical in the Marcellus Shale Basin, which you've all heard of in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, extending up into New York. The Barnett Shale in Texas, there's others in Wyoming and the Dakotas, and right here at home in the Taylorsville Basin. Now, whether they're actually going to drill and produce gas or oil remains to be seen. But right now, this company, Shore Exploration, some of whom representatives may be in the audience tonight, has leased the gas rights, the gas and oil rights, to probably approaching 90,000 acres in the Taylorsville Basin. Again, as Albert said, mostly Caroline County, but a significant chunk here in King George. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process for deciding whether they get to drill that the state government has in place. Now, stemming from those exploratory wells in the late 80s, the state legislature adopted a provision in the Virginia Code that applies specifically to this area. It's applying to tidewater by name, but tidewater is defined essentially to include most everything east of I-95. It's not just the Norfolk, Newport News area that we think of as tidewater. It includes every county underlying the Taylorsville Basin. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the code, what the state legislature has done for this area that, for instance, they have not yet done for Rockingham County over in the valley or Washington County in southwest Virginia. This is an independent section of the code. It's not part of the Virginia Oil and Gas Act. It's not part of the Virginia Groundwater Management Act. It's simply a standalone provision that applies to drilling near the Chesapeake Bay. It was adopted in 1989. It's been amended half a dozen times since then. This is what's currently on the books. It doesn't allow you to drill in the bay. It doesn't allow you to drill in tributaries to the bay. And as you all know, there's an awful lot of rivers and streams around here that are tributaries to the bay. It doesn't allow you to drill within 500 feet of those tributaries or resource protection areas that's so designated by county supervisors. Keep moving along. In the event you want to drill in areas where it's allowed, part of the application for a permit to drill from the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy is the submission of an environmental impact assessment. Now, this isn't the environmental impact statement that is required under federal law, but it's very similar. So the drilling company, the mining company would have to submit an environmental impact assessment to DMME with their application for a permit. DMME, in turn, sends the environmental impact assessment over to the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, who analyzes it, but also provides it to the public with a period of time for the public to review this impact assessment and submit comments to DEQ. We agree with this, we don't agree with that, we're horrified by this, they forgot to mention that. So public review of this environmental impact assessment will be very important should any company proceed with an application for a drilling permit. DEQ will analyze not only the assessment but the public comments and compile recommendations that it will send back over to DMME, recommendations that have to be considered by DMME in issuing and deciding whether to issue that drilling permit, and if so, how to condition it. DEQ has developed criteria down there and procedures for the preparation of these environmental impact assessments, and in fact just recently took another series or round of public comments on whether those criteria and procedures were adequate. So we'll be hearing more from DEQ about this process in the months to come. Then we go on with some restrictions on drilling activities in the Taylorsville Basin, not by name, in tidewater by name, which by definition includes the Taylorsville Basin. Directional drilling, and that's the horizontal drilling we're talking about, but also a more sort of traditional form of directional drilling might be to send your shaft down at a 45-degree angle. That's been done for decades. But we're really talking now about the horizontal drilling that can extend under the tributaries, for instance. That is not prohibited by this section of the code. It could extend under your neighbor's land, but only if you have an agreement from that neighbor. And this is the only part of Virginia that has this provision. That, number one, the person who's doing the drilling has to have the permission of the owners of the land that they're going to be drilling under or into. That's a special protection provided to residents of Tidewater. There's all sorts of other fairly standard conditions. You have to have your contingency plan, your proof of financial responsibility. You have to demonstrate that if problems develop, you're going to be able to take care of it. Well casing is an absolutely critical item for protecting the aquifer, the coastal aquifer that Albert mentioned, that they are going to be punching wells through that aquifer. Now the casing is what protects the aquifer from both the fracking fluid or gas that's pumped down the well and the gas and oil that they hope flows back up the well. It can't be overemphasized how important that is to protecting the usable groundwater in this area. They've got to have plans for off-site disposal of all the wastewater products. Then, one of the more important provisions of the code as it exists now is a provision that the state government will conduct a comprehensive study, or has the option of conducting a comprehensive study of the impacts of oil drilling in the Tidewater area. Now, I frankly don't know whether that was intentionally restricted to oil or whether it was simply an oversight not to include gas. Shore has stated in the record they intend to produce some oil with the gas, but it is primarily gas that they're after. And we would all be a lot better off if this provision either included or is interpreted to implicitly include gas or oil. This is a fairly important opportunity to study the comprehensive impacts. All those impacts Albert mentioned. Groundwater protection, surface water protection, air quality, but also noise, traffic, all sorts of pipeline construction. If gas wells start producing, you're going to have pipelines built to convey it to the commercial users. All sorts of cleanup plans that have to be made, and all that would have to be studied on a site-specific basis with that environmental impact assessment submitted along with the drilling permit application. But this is the only place that it would all be studied in a comprehensive fashion. If you're looking at the impacts of one well, it's a very different prospect than if you're looking at the impacts of 5 to 7 to 8, 900 wells. I'm going to come back to this section in just a moment and talk to you briefly about how your state senator, Richard Stewart, is trying to strengthen these provisions in a bill that he has in the Senate even as we speak. These are after this comprehensive study, if it is ever taken, after it is undertaken, the agencies have to really give some serious consideration to the conclusions and the analysis and the recommendations contained in that study. It could be a very, very useful measure for both buying time to look at what's coming down the road and figuring out what local governments in particular, but what you collectively can do to protect your communities. Now, we're standing in the midst of a groundwater management area because, as most of you know, the coastal aquifers that Albert mentioned are currently oversubscribed. We are collectively drawing more water out of those aquifers than is being replenished by nature. Whether it's for residential, agricultural, municipal, or industrial use, we are drawing more groundwater out of those aquifers than we should. So the prospect of drawing even greater quantities out to provide water for hydraulic fracturing, if in fact that is the type of fracturing that is undertaken, is a troubling prospect and may not be allowed by the state. But the Groundwater Protection Act, currently in the state code, provides generally for an exemption for oil and gas exploration and production, unless such withdrawal adversely affects the aquifer. I think DEQ is on record as saying they are very concerned about the coastal aquifer, and they do not think that they can afford to allow withdrawals of large quantities for hydraulic fracturing. But that's an early indication, and by no means is it a formal position for the agency. Quick question?
Yes, sir. When this was this written specifically for just basic drilling? And they never even considered fracking, I think, when they wrote this. So it was sort of
They did not do, well, they did fracking, because they've done hydraulic fracturing in oil and gas wells for over 50 years. What they didn't do is what's called high volume hydraulic fracturing, because they didn't have those lateral extensions. They didn't have the horizontal wells. So you'll hear some people, and shore representatives will tell you, there are plenty of gas wells where they don't use 3 to 5 million gallons, typical to the Marcellus shale. They might use 50,000 gallons, 80,000 gallons. Those aren't going to be the wells with the 1 mile extension of a horizontal shaft through the shale. So you're right, this was done before we had the current technology in place. Another piece of the existing code, I want to make sure people realize that local government does have a very important role in protecting communities from this industrial scale activity. This is part of the Oil and Gas Act, the Virginia Oil and Gas Act. No provision of this chapter shall limit the jurisdiction of other state agencies or local land use ordinances to protect community welfare. So the County Board of Supervisors has a very important role to play here in protecting community interests from this or any industrial activity. Now, that's the end of my slides. I want to mention one additional thing. As I said before, Senator Stewart has a bill not on the floor yet, but it's been introduced in the state Senate. It's Senate Bill 48. It would strengthen those, that code provision that applies to Tidewater, specifically by name. It would not, unfortunately, expand that comprehensive study to address oil or gas. He had that in an early version of the bill and was prevailed upon to take it out. But it would strengthen in some very important ways the regulations that DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, would use to control the activity of hydraulic fracturing. It would expand the study provisions for the site-specific studies. It's an important improvement. It's not everything we would like to see, but it is important. And for those of you who are his constituents, a word of appreciation is in order. We need to let him know that we appreciate him stepping out on a limb to try to protect the community. One quick question here.
Yeah, can you pull water out of the Potomac or Rappahannock River rather than the aquifers?
You can.
Repeat question.
Can you pull water, withdraw water from the rivers, Potomac and the Rappahannock, rather than suck it out of the aquifers to provide source of water for hydraulic fracturing? You can. There are limits. You have to have a permit, but you can do that. Pablo will probably tell you about the prospects for trucking in millions of gallons of water to Rockingham County to do the fracking there. One of the, I think, foremost impacts you would have had that proposal gone forward or if it ever returns to life. One other quick question.
And I just wanted to state that bill actually will go before the committee tomorrow afternoon, right after session. So anyone who is interested in speaking in favor, probably, is welcome to do so.
That's right. SB 48, Senator Stewart's bill, will be before the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources tomorrow afternoon, I believe.
Right after session.
Albert can clarify that.
Well, not only that, we're going to have Pablo speak, and then Stephen King, Assistant County Administrator, and then we're going to get a little bit more into the Q&A. So the goal for the timeline, thank you, Rick. The goal for the timeline is Pablo Cuevas and Stephen King are going to speak probably 20 minutes, half an hour, in that range. And then we're going to take questions. I'm a stickler on getting everybody out on time. We advertised it was going to be from 7 to 9. I had a question I asked. I said, how did somebody named Pablo Cuevas get to Rockingham County, which I associate more with long Germanic names rather than Pablo? I was just informed, and actually I knew ahead of time, Mr. Cuevas got out of communist Cuba just about a month before Castro took over. And he's now in leadership at Rockingham County. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, sir. I wish he was one of my state delegates. I kind of like him. I usually get a gut feeling about people, and I either like you or dislike you real quick, like, and then you'll have to prove yourself to me, one way or the other, because I have to do that with you guys. I have to prove myself to you folks. I remember.
Pablo, you gotta hold it up.
Hold it up.
There you go, hold it up. Hold it
Yeah,
up.
I had to prove myself to you guys when I came here, and I was attending college, and after Dad quit sending checks for me to go to this private school, and I needed some money, and I went to apply for a job for this lady that had this ad in the newspaper. She wanted someone to teach her son some Spanish, and I thought, boy, what an easy income I'm going to have. Got 17 and a half years of Spanish. I should be able to help this kid in high school. And when I got to that lady's house and I knocked on the door, and she said, hi, how are you? What can I help you? I said, yes, I'm here to answer the ad in the newspaper about helping someone with this his Spanish. She said, what is your name? I said, Pablo Cuevas. Where are you from? From Cuba. And then she just a real nice look at me and said, I think we went to a guy to teach my son. And I thought, boy, 17 and a half years old, I didn't know what my kind was. Mother forgot to tell me that. I was blaming on her. And it's kind of the same thing when I went to get my first loan for my first car. I ended up with a college degree. I ended up working at a poultry plant making dog food because you folks used to have some funny rules around here in the late 50s where if the color of your skin was a little different or you spoke with an accent or some kind of what have you, you just didn't get the same benefits that everybody else did. And I thought, well, it'll take a little time. I'll just have to prove a little something to these folks in here that we're okay. They just got to bear with us, and we'll work our way into their acceptance level. And I guess probably that's why I ended up running for board as supervisor. I thought, darn, I'm going to have to work hard and do something in here that is worthwhile for these people to say that maybe we ought to give him 5 minutes anyway, see what he can do for us. And I started out by being real active in an organization called JCs. And I used to come, I came as far as Warsaw to do some banquets or programs out there, whatever. I never was in this immediate area. I don't think you had JCs around here. In any event, after that, someone kind of motivated me to be dumb enough to run for public office and run and be a board of supervisor member for $10,000 a year. And when you deduct some of the expenses and so forth, you go to bed at night sometimes and wonder, you say, what am I doing this for? But I have enjoyed it. It means a great deal to me. I got to know a couple of these folks in here, and Miss Brabo and this other lady from Westmoreland. I'm real active in the Virginia Association of Counties, and I was on your board of directors, and I'm in the education committee. And one day we're sitting up there, and there's this little blonde-haired young lady and this her sidekick from Westmoreland County. And I always like to watch the crowd, and I'm watching you because I'm trying to read your faces and your eyeballs, and usually that tells me, how we getting along with each other. And I was watching these two little women from King George in Westmoreland County, and boy, were they active, and were they had something to share with us. And I told myself, I said, some of us in this committee that have been here for quite some time, we're going to have to find ourselves a way to deflate these two little women from these two counties real quickly. Because if we don't take some air out of these two women, they're going to run over this place in here. And I'm still watching them. I'm not on the board anymore, but I am going to be in a committee where I can watch them because they have a lot of interest. I kind of like the fact that they have a lot of interest in what they do, and they're members of a board of supervisors because they feel that they want to make a contribution to the community in which they live. And I think that that's what all of us have tried to do. And you know, one of the things that I want to kind of bring to your attention, because I have developed a bad habit of not trusting too many people or too many things until you really, really prove yourself to me. Most of it is from experience. I got in my home entitled to 2,100 and some acres of land, some of it waterfront in Cuba that I'd like to sell to you very cheap if you have any interest in. Because I had a guy that in January 1 of 1959 took over the place, and he said, you know, you don't know how lucky you are that I'm here to save you, and I'm going to really make life real good for you. And from that day on, you know, he owned a farm, and I have been bouncing around the state of Virginia, you know, doing one thing or another. And that is what I have developed a little mistrust in things. Like when my friends are talking about the state code and laws and regulations and so forth, my problem with it has been that I found that a lot of those things were put into place by well-intended people like him in the General Assembly, but when he's not there and he's gone, I don't know who else is going to be in power and how they're going to enforce, you know, those regulations. And that usually seems like it changes, whether it is, you know, one party or the other one is in control. The folks that run those state agencies or federal agencies usually change, and they do what the main administrators, you know, tell them that are guided by their personal philosophies or their party philosophies. And I have seen, you know, too many changes from conservatives to liberals and so forth, you know, in how a lot of those things happen. And I don't like to play games with Rockingham County and the people of Rockingham County. And I am very, very sensitive to all these things that, you know, that I hear from folks. And, you know, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Okay, I got some land again. I'm going to sell you in Cuba whenever you get ready. I am going to, you know, ask Steve King, who is our Deputy County Administrator of Rockingham County, and Steve is a graduate of VMI. That's at a little military school down in Lexington. He has an engineering degree, and I have a habit of trying to make sure that I never convince myself that I know everything about every subject. And I try to take folks that I think that can bring something to the table